And now for our talk on resilient. I'd like to introduce Stacey Taubman. As the founder and CEO of Rise Collaborative, Stacey launched a company that is changing the way women do business. Since opening in February of 2017, Rise Collaborative's growing membership includes 400 of some of the most impressive businesswomen in St. Louis and Denver. Focused on empowering women and business and building social capital, Stacey and Rise Collaborative create meaningful connections between individuals, companies, organizations, and more to foster stronger and healthier business community for women. Stacey is also the co-founder and co-president of Rise Society, the 501c3 arm of Rise Collaborative, which provides programming, mentorships, and scholarships to help women of all ages tap into powerful pipelines for success. Stacey, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. It's an honor to be here. Happy Friday, everyone. I know it's quite early for some people, including myself. I'm in Denver currently, so you'll have to excuse me if I have to shake off some of the cobwebs and I'm drinking caffeine as we discussed. Don't judge my desktop. We are going to dive in to talk about something that I am really passionate about. The concept of being resilient. And oh goodness, did 2020 teach us a lot about it? You know, when I think of this topic, I love to think about it as how to rise through adversity. And, you know, this topic is meaty, right? We could definitely spend hours and hours talking about resilience. I have 30 minutes to get some content out to you guys. So I want to preface it by saying I am just barely going to scratch the surface. There is a lot to be talked about. But the teacher in me, I was a former high school math teacher. The teacher in me wants to make sure that I give you 3 really good takeaways that you can put into action and put into place. So while we're not going to cover the full breadth of the conversation, I hope that you walk away feeling like at least one thing I said you can put into practice into your life. You know, and this concept of resilience, or being resilient, I should say, you know, I think of it a lot as a muscle. And not that I enjoy working out. Let's be honest here. My husband does, but I do not. And he loves to say, no pain, no gain. And every time he says that, I just sort of roll my eyes like, oh, it's so annoying. And the sad truth of it is he's right, which he is often, again, irritating, but true. You know, really what it comes down to it, the sad thing with resilience is it's not something we can think our way into. It's not something that when life is easy that we learn. The unfortunate thing is we learn resiliency through the adversity and the pain, which is not sexy or glamorous and can be a bit annoying at times, but it is interesting and it is how we go about things. So before I dive into my 3 takeaways, let's see, come on, technology, let's see. Before I dive into my 3 takeaways, I wanna set the stage. I was putting this presentation together and I stumbled upon this picture. And I don't know about you, but looking at a picture from February 27th, 2020, it was a little shock and awe for me to see all these people together, no mask, you know, just weeks before the world sort of imploded, if you will, right? So before I go into that picture, let me back up. For those of you who don't know me, as she mentioned, I'm the founder, CEO of Rise Collaborative. And what Rise is we are on a mission to create a pipeline for successful women and girls. And we do it 3 ways. 1, by providing a beautiful workspace. You're looking at a part of our space in Denver. 2, by putting on weekly programming to help women grow personally and professionally. And 3, my favorite thing, which you mentioned in the bio, is we have a nonprofit that connects high school girls to our professional women. So we started in St. Louis in 2017 and had the great fortune of being cash flow positive from day 1. Then decided that we're going to expand to Denver, started working on national expansion. I always say on a good day, global expansion at the end of that year, and got it going in Denver in 2018, opened our doors in 2019, and finally in February 2020 hit cash flow positive. And I'm going to tell you, that was a great month for us. You know, we hit cash flow positive. We had this beautiful, huge event and finally felt like we were on our way. You see where the story's going, right? I hope. Little did I know, a few weeks later, you know, Friday the 13th, I don't know about you guys, but Friday the 13th, March 13th will always be, you know, in my mind. That was the last day we were open in both cities before the stay-at-home order. And I chuckle a little bit at how naive and how I really thought, oh, we're just gonna be home for a little bit, we'll be back. And what a different place we were in then. But I'm so thankful for that time because it taught me so many things. And during this lovely, challenging past year and some change, these 3 lessons that I'm going to talk about today are what got me through, because you can imagine owning a co-working space, as we were talking, before we started, of owning a physical workspace that the bulk of your revenue comes from people coming on in, right? Who wants to come in during this time? It definitely was a challenging business to be in. And I'm really lucky to still be here. I will say my competitors, 6 months before I opened Rise in St. Louis, a company called The Wing opened, and they were the leader in the market. They opened 10 locations in 2 years. And 6 months after I opened, my second competitor, The Riveter, opened, and they opened 10 locations in 2 years. And, I really looked up to them in many, many ways. And I'm sad to say neither one made it through COVID. So I recognize just how lucky and how grateful I am to still be standing. And I really do think it's due to these 3 things that have kept me going. Now, is there a way for me to see, I don't know, good old technology. I'm like, can I see the chat function? I want to get you guys chatting. It's hard just talking to you in person. I get to have the interaction. I cannot see the chat feature. So I guess I'll just keep plugging away. What I was going to have you guys chat in the chat function is whether or not you know who this gentleman is. And I know that not everyone listening today is from St. Louis, but I wanted to start my talk with this gentleman. Does anyone know? I guess we could, if you want to unmute, since I can't see the chat function. Okay, well, good. I stumped you. I like it. Well, so a couple years ago, I was asked to speak at a very large conference at the Four Seasons in St. Louis, and I was incredibly nervous. So to prepare, I got on their website and thought, okay, I'm going to check out their speakers from previous years. And I stumbled across this gentleman. His name is Jason Selk. I encourage you to write that down, Jason Selk. And I watched his talk, which was such a blessing and a curse, because it made me 10 times more nervous than I was before him. Let's not kid ourselves. He is incredible. So Jason Selk is a performance and mental toughness coach. He was hired by the St. Louis Cardinals, the good old Cardinals, to come in and help them to win a World Series. He was a big part of them breaking their, they hadn't won a World Series since 1982. And he came in and helped them to win the 2006 World Series and the 2011 World Series. He's incredible. He has a book and many, many videos all centered around this topic of relentless solution focus, which has changed my life and something that I often go back to. And I am not going to do it justice, so please watch his videos and read his book, but this is my take from it. So problem-centered thinking he talks about, let's start there. How many of you guys, and again, I guess we could do hands, or you can do that feature where you can put your hand up. How many of us have found ourselves sitting around with our girlfriends or our coworkers or, our family and been moaning and groaning about, I don't know, our boss, that one girlfriend that drives us crazy, that one relative that you just can't spend more than 10 minutes with without rolling your eyes. Anyone else? I thank you for raising your hand. Yes. Yeah. I'm seeing a clap. Yes. Right. We've all been there. I definitely, yes, have. And let's not kid ourselves. In some ways it's nice, right? You can vent and you can commiserate, but that hour, sometimes 2 hours, sometimes 5 hours goes by. And where are you, right? Nothing has been resolved. You've stewed. Sometimes I've gotten even more fired up, and found more of a problem and gotten more charged up about that boss who drives us crazy, right? But you're right back where you were before. And so what I love about Jason Selk is he says, that's an example of problem-centered thinking. Right when you go down that rabbit hole, you got to stop yourself in the first 60 seconds and ask yourself, what is one thing I can do that's going to make this situation better? And for me, sometimes I say, what is one thing I can do that's going to make me feel better? And I'm not gonna lie, I'm the weirdo that's sitting at home literally saying that out loud many a times. And sometimes I have to say it like 2 or 3 times because I want to go back down that perseverating road of, oh, right? It's hard to stop those thoughts. But I find if I say it out loud and say, what is one thing I can do to make myself feel better? It definitely stops me in my tracks. Now, don't let me mislead you. There are many, many, many times that I've asked that question where I am just blank as blank can be. I'm like, ooh, I have no freaking clue. No freaking clue. But the act of asking that question is so helpful for me. And it just forces you to stop going down that path and start building that new muscle. No pain, no gain muscle we talked about. So relentless solution focus. So that is something that has gotten me through, in terms of, that example of a boss. Let me use that to kind of go further. So we're moaning, my boss is so mean. I hate how they manage me. I don't know, all the things we've all said. I don't know if anyone wants to be bold enough to share something you've moaned about your boss before. Ashley, you want me to pick on you, or will you be mad at me that I'm picking on you?
Oh man, so Stacey is constantly getting me to buck up a little bit when I have low accountability moments. So I will expect my boss to, when I'm my last employer, now I'm my own boss, but sometimes it's easy to complain about how someone's doing something poorly rather than just, rise to the occasion and do it right yourself, even though it's not your job. So I've learned a lot about that.
Yeah, thank you for being bold. I just don't want to keep rambling on for 30 minutes nonstop without pausing a little bit somewhere in here. Totally. It's this idea of being like, do I need to get a new job? Do I need to quit? Do I need to get a mentor? There's a great book called Managing Up that I encourage all of my employees to read because they need to manage me up. There are many, many solutions that are small actions that can get you out of that problem-centered thinking. Now that's my life example. I always like to then follow up with a business example. So as I mentioned, on Friday the 13th in March, we shut our doors. And Monday rolled around and oh my goodness, I so wanted to go into problem-centered thinking. What the heck does this mean for us? But I just tried my hardest to not allow myself to go into problem-centered thinking. And on Monday, the first day I'm at home that I have quote unquote nothing to do, I was like, what do I do? So I was like, what is one thing I can do? My physical workspace, that's not happening right now. Let's not kid ourselves. What is one thing I can do to provide value for my members in this trying, awful time that we're all navigating together? And I must have said that out loud to myself. I don't even want to admit how many times. Well, the thing that finally came to me is the thing that we provide, the value of Rise above and beyond our physical workspace is our community. And here we are all in strife, right? And struggling through this time. And we have some of the most incredible women. How can I provide value? So by Tuesday, this is embarrassing, I bet it's the truth. By Tuesday, I felt the need to provide to my members 4 virtual programmings a day. That was my solution. So I totally swung that pendulum far, far left. I was like, okay, well, our space is closed, so I'm going to give as much virtual programming as humanly possible. So literally, we had 4 virtual options led by my members, for my members a day for the first week or 2 of the pandemic, which is quite embarrassing to think that my members had nothing to do with their life except for jump on Zoom with me all day. But that's where my head went, right? Then I eventually dropped it down to 4 a week, then 2 a week. And I finally realized, 1 a week is probably more than enough. But that was me taking that first step forward and being relentless solution focused. I had no idea how we were going to survive this, but at least I could provide value. So that is my first tip of the day for resilience. Relentless solution focus. I'm glad I saw someone go get a notebook to write that down. I love it. Yes, Jason Selk. You will tremendously enjoy his talks. He's an incredible public speaker and puts me to shame on how good he is. So first and foremost, relentless solution focus. Now, before I move on to my second takeaway, I do want to be clear about something because I think it can be a little bit confusing. There's a term out there these days called toxic positivity. You may or may not have heard that term, but it's a big buzzy term out there these days. And I want to make sure that I'm clear that I don't think of relentless solution focus is the same thing as toxic positivity. I think where people go wrong, the same thing, like swinging that pendulum too far. You know, when you're in strife and you're struggling, I think people, they're going to be like, just be positive. You got it. Good vibes only, you know, and they're coming from this great place, right? It's this idea of you're trying to help somebody. But I don't know about you, but when I am in that place of struggle and you're like, just be happy. Yeah, that's really not so productive for me, right? So it's not that everything's okay and you're pretending everything's okay. The world's imploding, right? COVID was a nightmare for many of us. It's not that we're not allowing ourselves to see or feel that. I'll be honest. Sometimes when I ask myself, what is one thing I can do to feel better? The answer really was lay in bed and watch Netflix all day. Truly. You know, it wasn't that I was just like, everything's gonna be fine. I got this. Right. So please don't misunderstand this idea of relentless solution focus as the same thing as toxic positivity, good vibes only. I wanted to make sure I said that because my next point in some ways is going to contradict myself and I didn't want to leave anyone too confused. So relentless solution focus, step 1. Step 2 sounds like hooey in many, many ways in my mind. If I was in the audience listening, I would kind of roll my eyes right about now. So feel free if that's the feeling bubbling up for you. But I have found the hard way that what has helped me the most in the worst of the worst times in my life is actually leaning in and facing the worst case scenario. I feel like so often when we're in a place of fear and that fight or flight, we're trying to avoid thinking about what does this actually mean for my life? We're doing everything we possibly can to actually lean in and say, okay, if that happens, if I can't fix my boss, because let's be honest, you can't fix your boss. If, you know, nothing's going to get better at my job and I've tried everything, what is that worst case? Well, that worst case might actually be you need to leave. You know, but it's painful sometimes to actually think about that and lean into it, but it's incredibly freeing when you actually do. It's super counterintuitive, but it is. And so I have 2 fun examples to help drive this point home, and one is comic relief a little bit, but there is a point to my comic relief and story. So I thought, you know, there was a girl who had RSVP'd for this talk who was a former student of mine / Pommy. So I thought she would get a kick out of this lovely picture. And this is a St. Louis talk. So, you know, the good old St. Louis question. For those of you who are not from St. Louis, can anyone share what the St. Louis question is that everyone unfortunately is subjected to when they come to St. Louis? Does anyone know what the St. Louis question is? It's kind of obnoxious. The question that people often get when they're in St. Louis is, what high school did you go to? Which is kind of silly, but it's the question that everyone asks. So to answer that question, I was a Lafayette Lancer, and this is a picture of me. I don't know if you can figure out which one is me. If you can't, I will show you later. It's in a picture down the road. I was on the swimming and diving team at Lafayette High School. I was a competitive gymnast growing up, and, you know, come high school, they thought, oh, you can flip and twist. You'll be a great diver. Come on onto the team, right? So I did, and they're not wrong. You know, flipping and twisting on the floor and flipping and twisting on the off the diving board isn't too different, except, you know, one you land on your head and one you land on your feet. So in some ways I was good at it. In other ways, I drove myself bonkers. I had not yet learned the idea of lean in and face the worst case scenario. What I used to do is I would stand on that diving board and I would twitch and I would fidget and I'd mess with my swimsuit and I would start and stop, and I drove myself bonkers. Truly drove myself bonkers. The amount of mental anguish I put myself through is not funny at all, if we're actually being honest. I actually quit the diving team after my junior year because I just couldn't take it anymore. I was so scared of hitting that darn diving board or doing a big old belly flop. It's called smacking, you know? I was terrified of it. And so much so that I drove myself bonkers. Fast forward to my 20s, ironically enough, I started coaching the diving team. I coached the diving team for about 10 years and I loved it. And let me tell you, those kids, some of them, they took some serious smacks. And a couple, I'm sad to say, hit that board. But, you know, it was eye-opening to me to finally face the worst. I finally saw what the worst thing was, what I was so scared of. And I realized, don't misunderstand me, nobody enjoys smacking. It's a physical pain that you experience when you smack or do a belly flop or even hitting the board. You know, they definitely, some of them even broke their fingers, and that sucks. However, I can't say that that physical pain was anywhere near the mental anguish that I had put myself through. And I look back and really wish that I could have faced the absolute worst and embraced it. I would have loved diving so much more. So that is my silly personal example, but we're here as professionals, so I feel the need to actually give you a professional example of where I actually put this into place. And I think why I'm here talking to you all today. So this is our beautiful workspace in St. Louis with some of our amazing members who I love. You know, again, owning a physical co-working space in the middle of the pandemic was not pretty. If I'm just being really transparent with all of you guys, it was a bloodbath. It really was a bloodbath. Like I said, my competitors didn't survive. And, you know, we tried so many things, but financially, I really was running out of money. And come September, I can remember calling my business partner. If you guys don't know her, her name's Kate Wigman. She's in St. Louis and she's incredible. And, you know, she helped me start the company. So we've been together a long time. And she's seen me face a lot of adversity. And I'm always problem solving and always keep moving. And for the first time ever, September 2020, Labor Day weekend, I gave good old Kate a call. And I said, Kate, I don't think we're going to make it. I just really don't know how we're going to survive. Financially, we're running out of money. I just don't know if I have it in me anymore to fight. I just don't know. I think we need to talk about this company's not going to make it. And so we sat there for a couple hours and hashed out what that meant. You know, what did it look like with my investors? What did I have to tell them? You know, I was going to have to declare bankruptcy. I have so many personal guarantees in this business. There's no way to avoid bankruptcy. And I don't laugh like that's a light. I don't mean to laugh through that that's to take that lightly, but that was the truth. You know, what would I do? It was the first time in my life, or first time since starting Rise, that I actually started thinking about what does life after Rise look like? I even got on job boards and was like, what would I even want to do? I truly, truly leaned in and faced, you know, the worst. I even messaged my investors right after Labor Day and said, hey, things aren't great. I'm going to give it one more month, but I can't promise we're going to be around. And I had phone calls with all of them. And it's so counterintuitive. But leaning in and facing the worst really freed me up in so many ways to keep going. And it sounds so silly. And notice I wasn't problem-centered thinking. I wasn't thinking about all the things I couldn't control. I was turning inward and being relentlessly solution-focused, but in a way that sort of embraced that we might not survive this, which was challenging. And again, I hope you don't think that I'm being toxic positivity here. It wasn't that we were going to shut our doors and I'd be like, oh, cool, it's all good. I'm fine. You know, it would have been incredibly painful. This is my baby. I've put my blood, sweat, and tears into this, but it's so interesting how when you let go of that control or that illusion of control, because let's be honest, we didn't have control. When you let go, it really frees your space up in your brain, which brings me to my last point, which is a really long quote, and I apologize. I'll read it for those of you who don't want to read it on the screen. I love this quote, and I would actually argue I could swap out the word for intelligence for creativity. So it does relate to today's topic, or today's group, I should say. The test of a first-rate intelligence or creativity is the ability to hold two opposing ideas in the mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. One should, for example, be able to see things as hopeless, yet be determined to make them otherwise. I love that quote. And we often forget that. We think it's either hopeless or we're going to totally be okay, right? But the reality is it's both at all times. So to make sense of this, again, I liked the first quote to be sort of silly and in the past, and the second example to be a little bit more business related. So I've alluded to this. I actually taught math for 12 years. I don't know if anyone's having PTSD seeing this problem on the board, so I apologize. It's a little early for that. So I taught math for 12 years, and every single year, without a shadow of a doubt, when I got to good old factoring, I would hear in every class at least one student raise their hand and ask me a question, which I'm sure at least one of you here today has asked your teacher. The good old question of, when am I ever going to need to use this in my life? Why the heck am I learning about this stupid thing called factoring? And if you didn't ask that, you might have thought it, because it definitely came out every single year, every hour. Yes. Oh, yes. Thank you, Matt. Thank you. Yes. You might have been that student asking me that darn question. When am I ever going to need to use this? This is so stupid. Why am I learning factoring? Oh, right. And I'll be honest, even as a math teacher, when I was a student, I hated factoring. We in life are trained often to enjoy things that are step 1, step 2, step 3, boom, there's your answer. You know, this very clear path, this certainty feels so much better. It's when we're facing this uncertainty and a scary path that it's icky and it's hard, right? When you stare at a math problem like this, if you're like I was, it feels hopeless. How the heck am I going to factor this darn problem? I have no idea where to begin. It feels incredibly overwhelming. Ooh. But at the same time, what helps you to solve that problem is putting your pen to paper. I was a weirdo who did math with pen. Yes. Put that pen to paper and start putting numbers on the page. And I'm not going to tell you that I get the numbers right the first time. 99% of the time, I put the numbers on the page and it's a hot mess. It's soul crushing to do math and have a whole page of math, right? And then find the mistake up here and you just have to scratch it all out and start over. But that is the reality. So what I would say to my students, I'd say, you're right. 99.9% of you guys, yeah, you're not going to be factoring in your day job. That's just the truth of the matter. I wish it was, because it wasn't, because I love me some factoring now. But most of you will not be. But here's the thing that will be relevant in your life, and I do think it's true still today, is that you're going to be faced with problems that when you first look at them seem completely impossible. There's no way I can do this. But you have to build up that muscle to still be willing to put that pencil to paper, even when it feels absurd. Like there's no way 2 and 3 are going to go together and give me 7, right? You got to start by putting something on that paper. And weirdly enough, by making a huge mistake, having the wrong numbers, getting it completely off rails, gets you often to where you're going, which again is super counterintuitive. And I appreciate you indulging me and allowing me to nerd out and talk about math for a minute. So hopefully you're not totally rolling your eyes or hating this presentation. So I will now be a little bit more on track and talk about business. So what does it mean today? And how did I use it in the pandemic? Well, this is an interesting story. And since it's a smaller group and I still have a decent amount of time, I'll go into it a little bit. So, you know, with the pandemic, the first thing we did when things seemed impossible is we did all that virtual program. We launched a digital platform, and I was like, by December, we're going to have 1,000 members, you know, and I thought Rise Digital was what was going to save us. And it was good, but it was not going to save us. There were definitely some challenges with Rise Digital because, you know, let's be honest, we're all over Zoom, you know, and there was 450 choices that you could choose from. So that was me putting that pen to paper and trying something, right? Getting creative, thinking outside the box. Had to get that eraser out, come up with plan B, or as they were calling it, a pivot. Had to have another pivot. That word was a little overplayed. So my second attempt to solve the math problem was an after school program. I thought, look at me, I'm a high school math teacher. I have all this space. Students aren't going back to school. I'll do this cool after school program. And it was great, right? We got press in Denver. We even got on Good Morning America. It was awesome. And yet it still didn't solve my problem. It did not take off. I didn't have nearly the number of students we needed to be able to keep afloat. So got that eraser out a second time. Well, what finally saved us and what has been a godsend and helped us to be here today to talk to you guys is a pretty weird, unexpected experience in my life. And this is going to go off rails, but I'll bring it back. And some of you obviously already know this story and some of you don't. I had an unexpected surprise for my on Ancestry.com and 23andMe. Surprise, the father that raised me was not my father. I was conceived through donor conception, and my biological father is actually a world-renowned plastic surgeon. And I have on the call today, Grandma Donna, his mother, and I think I saw a name, potentially his aunt is potentially on this call as well. And shock of a lifetime, but also quite a blessing in my life. And he says to me at one point, want to open a med spa? Which, if anyone who knows me knows that it was the most unlikely thing that I could ever possibly do. I used generic face wipes. I had never even gotten a facial till 2018. So the idea of starting a med spa, let alone putting one in the middle of a co-working space, seemed incredibly bizarro, right? And I can tell you, when I first said to some people, I think I'm going to open a med spa in Rise, they were like, I'm sorry, what? What are you doing? There's no way, that's not going to work. And I was like, well, I got to try something, right? So we actually opened Spritz Med Spa inside of Rise, Denver in November 2020. In the heart of the pandemic, in the heart of it being hopeless, running out of all cash, open a new company, right? That seems insanity. And let's just be honest, it was in some ways. I'm not saying that this is always the right choice to open a new business in the middle of your business failing. So please don't walk away with that takeaway. But it's this idea of you got to try something. And in this case, due to really unique, bizarre life experiences, this opportunity came my way. It felt out there, but it was something. And so I started it, and it has been, I'm so thankful because it's been so fun to start a new company and learn something new. And this business is fascinating. And I get to know my new biological family in a way that I never would have predicted. And I'm just so grateful and thankful. So this is how I put into play this idea of keeping those two opposing thoughts in your head at the same time. This is hopeless, and I'm determined to figure out a way to keep going. So let me just, again, the teacher in me wants to make sure that you can walk away with these 3 takeaways. And I wanted to unveil the nerdy picture of myself. I wanted to embarrass myself in case you didn't figure out which one was me. So again, the 3 things that got me through the pandemic and built up my resilient muscle and helped me to be here today to speak to all of you is, first, relentless solution focus. Jason Selk, S-E-L-K, relentless solution focus. And it's not something that you're born with. And even Jason talks about he has to practice it. It's a muscle. It's like annoyingly working out in that good old gym, no pain, no gain. Then the second thing is, don't avoid the worst. You can't get away from it. It's not going anywhere. Lean into it. And when in doubt, you got to try something. And it may be the most out there, bizarro thing to try, but sometimes that is the thing that gets you to where you need to go. And so those are the 3 takeaways. But again, I'm a nerdy quote person, and I started with one quote and it opened Pandora's box. So before I end, I want to give you 2 more quotes, because I think that if you hate my 3 takeaways, at least maybe you'll like one of my quotes. So here are my 2 quotes to end with. There's a gentleman named Viktor Frankl. If you've never heard of him, I again encourage you to look him up. Viktor Frankl survived the Holocaust and went on to write a book, The Man's Search for Meaning, I believe is the title, and developed a whole philosophy called logotherapy, and just really not only survived, but thrived. And he inspires me every day. And I'm not gonna lie. There's many days I read his quotes in my darkest days to pick me back up off that ground. Everything can be taken away from a man, but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. Such a good quote. Definitely helps me through these times. And I encourage you to read his book. The first half of his book, if you've never read it, is his story surviving the Holocaust. And then the last half is all about his logotherapy. And last, but certainly not least, at Rise Collaborative, we live by the quote, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And I will tell you, yes, those 3 things help me to get here, but more than anything, the people I'm surrounded by. I have had so many days, even still in 2021, where I'm just like, I just don't think I can do it. There's my muscle is fatigued. I'm exhausted. I just can't anymore. And I really am on that floor thinking, I don't know how I'm going to get up. And it's the people I'm surrounded with, many of who are on this call today, who I will reach out and just say, I don't know if I can do this. And they're there picking me back up. They're there reminding me. They're there dusting me off and saying, you can do this. Keep going. You know, those people are who you need in your life to be able to build that resilient muscle when you're feeling a little exhausted and that muscle is not holding its own anymore. So I encourage you, and it looks like many of you, by attending things like this, you know, this organization is incredible. And I'm sure that you can find 5 amazing people in this organization or at Rise Collaborative. I am obviously biased, but I think we have some of the most incredible women in our community. And if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here talking to you all. So thank you for having me. And thank you for listening to me ramble on. And I hope you at least took away 1 or 2 things that you can, pardon me, put into play in your life when you're having those challenging days or experiencing adversity, so that you too can rise above it.
Thank you so much, Stacey. Wonderful talk. And I want to just point out, you have some love in the chat. I know you couldn't see it. Maybe.
Yeah, yes, I was wanting to have interaction and conversation, but technology's not my friend.
And when you're presenting, it's always hard to find the right buttons. So, no, Ashley was saying, Rise is not just a workplace, but it's a community, and it helped everyone get through this last year. So appreciate that comment. And I do want to open it up for questions. If you have a question, you can either raise your hand or you can enter it in the chat. Well, I have a couple of questions that I wrote down, so I'll go ahead and get started.
I love it. I know I covered a lot in a very little time, so I totally get it, and I apologize.
Yeah, no, I think it was great. And I think, I do think there were some really great takeaways. And it's funny, like the books and the lessons that I read or the tools that I use and how much overlap there is. And, you know, one thing that you had mentioned about like facing the worst case scenario, there is a procedure called a pre-mortem, where you think about everything that could kill your business or kill this concept. And there's different like tools out there to help you do this, or how you can like, you know, use that in a meeting. But we've done that before, and it's scary because people think of a lot of things that could kill your business or kill your concept. And it's scary to walk into that meeting and then try to face the reality, but you walk out coming with a lot of different ideas. So I really like that you mentioned that. And I didn't know if there was any specific tools that you used in those conversations to like help you get through or help you brainstorm
to get through that panic feeling of like, oh my God, here's 500 things. That's going to be why I'm not going to succeed. Yeah. You know, I think what really helps me and what, why I like, obviously I couldn't do it as a junior in high school. I was terribly fearful and avoided all fear, right? Quit the diving team because I was so fearful. There's a book, again, I'm a nerdy reader, so everything goes back to books, so I apologize, but there's a book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyways. Okay. By Susan Jeffries, I believe is her last name, Susan Jeffries. I love that book because she talks about fear as 3 types of fear. And I'm sure I'm gonna butcher some of it, but it's this idea of, you know, the first level of fear is I'm going to lose my job, or the things that happen to you. I'm blanking on the second level because I wasn't prepared to talk about this. But the third level, she talks about the real fear of, no matter what those fears are, 1, 2, but the 3 applies to all of them. The real fear is, can I handle it? Can I survive this? At the end of the day, all fears boil down to, can I handle this? Or this fear that let me rephrase that. The fear that I can't handle this. And she talks a lot about how to face that. And so I think that book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyways, is what allows me to have that moment of panic, because let's not kid ourselves, that never goes away, I don't think. But then to use that practice, that muscle of feeling it and then moving on. Because I've learned through my experiences that I can handle it. Right. And that goes back to what I was saying in the beginning. This is not something, in my opinion, that you can think your way through. Building up that muscle to be able to not shut down when you're in panic comes from practicing it, right? Having those conversations, facing something really hard and realizing, oh, wait, this sucks, but I'm still standing. So that's my soapbox on that one. Feel the fear and take it. Feel the fear and do it anyways. Okay, Ashley looks like asked a question. How much of resilience is incrementalism? Do wins come fast like big memberships, or slow builds over time using freemium? Ooh, Ashley, of course, Ashley asks a really good question. How much of resilience is incrementalism? Yeah, I think I understand your question. That's a good question. My husband always makes fun of me because he says that I am somebody that has high highs and low lows, and he is like steady Eddie through it all, which is why we're so good together. And I often call him like my walking Xanax. Like, I just put my hand on him and I'm like, so, I am a person who has high highs, right? So sometimes it is those small things. Like in September, let's go back to September, right? When I called my business partner, I'm like, I'm done. There's no way. It's hopeless. We really aren't going to make it. And I really started planning life after Rise. But then in September, I started, to your point, Ashley, having these small wins. Weirdly enough, we started selling a few memberships. Now, these were $100 memberships. These weren't like selling an office, right? But I think for me, it is this snowball effect of okay, maybe this isn't so hopeless. And so big, fast growth in sprints or slow, steady. Yes. For me, it's always been a snowball. This is a funny analogy that I sometimes use that you guys may or may not like. There's a famous painting called A Sunday Afternoon. Let's see if I can do this quickly. I'm going to share my screen one more time because this is something that I think ties to what Ashley's saying. There's a famous, and yes, I have 4,050 tabs open. I am that person.
How mine looks.
Yes, I'm always a little embarrassed to show it. A Sunday Afternoon. So there's this famous painting that I think of a lot. Let's go to images. That I think this is a beautiful painting. A Sunday Afternoon by George Seurat, and I have no idea how to say his last name. This was done in a style of art called Pointillism. I am not artistic, so I don't know this for a fact, but I have often thought about what it's like to paint a picture by just putting dots on a page. I mean, this image is so stunningly beautiful, and it blows my mind that it was made by millions of dots on a page, right? And I believe in Pointillism, don't quote me, is that you can only use 3 primary colors. And somehow out of that, they created this. For me, I often think about this painting when it's my entrepreneurship journey. There are so many, think about if you painted this, right? You're putting you have this vision of what do you want it to look like? You have this direction you're headed. But when you first put those dots on that page, let's not kid ourselves. It feels so random, and the average person walking by is going to be like, what the heck are you doing? They're not going to be able to see what you can see. And as the artist, I would imagine there'd be so many times where you're like, there's no way this thing's going to come together, but then you put that last dot on that page and it all sort of makes sense. So for me, that's what this journey has been about these million little dots that sometimes feel completely random, sometimes feel like they're never going to make a difference, or like, oh, that was a waste of a meeting, or but all those steps forward and those dots do come together to sort of create that beautiful image in the end. So that was a really long-winded way of answering your question, Ashley. I apologize.
I like that though, because I feel like it's about having a vision too. You know, and maybe that vision does change a little bit and the painting does, you know, take on a different composition in one corner or whatnot, but that doesn't mean it's a bad painting, you know?
Yes, I always say you have to be really clear in your why, but you have to be flexible in your how and your what. There's just no way for your how and your what not to evolve. My how and what have dramatically evolved, you know, and changed through the years. But my why has always been, I want to change lives, as hokey as that sounds. That has always been that consistent thread through everything I've done, teaching, you know, Rise Collaborative, even though a med spa is a little bit different way in which we change people's lives, you know, how you feel on the inside and allowing that to be reflected on the outside is still important.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. I had another question about toxic positivity. So when you were talking about this, I realized that a lot of people probably think this is an external thing, but I experience this as an internal thing.
Oh, interesting.
Like, you know, you should be feeling better about this. You should be staying positive for your team. You should be, you know, so I'm wondering if you've experienced that and if there's anything, any tools you can provide.
I call that shooting yourself, you know, like you gotta stop shooting yourself because it's highly unproductive. But yes, I have done that many a times. And to be perfectly honest, I have the most amazing counselor ever. And, you know, she has taught me a lot about relentless solution focus and how to stop shooting myself. And she was the one that said to me, you know, sometimes you just need to say out loud. And again, it's the weird saying it out loud. If I just think it, it doesn't stop me. It's the saying it out loud that has helped me to, you know, sometimes you will catch me. Well, hopefully you won't because that would be embarrassing. But I absolutely will sometimes say, you know, wow, this is just really hard. And saying that out loud and allowing myself to recognize that this is just really hard, weirdly enough, sort of stops me from that shooting yourself, because it sort of gives myself permission to not be okay. And I think the toxic positivity comes from that drive, either externally or internally, that everything has to be okay. And gosh, I wish it was. It would be amazing if that worked, but it doesn't. And so my counselor definitely taught me to lean in and be like, maybe you do just need to watch Netflix all day. And it's ironic and it's very counterintuitive because when you stop shooting yourself, you often get outside, you often recover and get back on track faster than when you do constantly beat yourself up for it, right? When you're constantly beating yourself up for it, weirdly, it slows you down. But when you actually say, wow, this is really hard, maybe I just do need to take a day, weirdly, you get back on track that much faster, which you don't think is going to happen. The fear is if I let myself just pause and do whatever it is I need to do to feel better, that I'm just never going to get back up. At least that was my fear. I don't want to project that on anyone else. But yeah. So saying, weirdly enough, and so all of you are going to start saying stuff out loud and be talking to yourself like a weirdo that I am. Wow, this is just might be really hard. What do I need? Mm-hmm. Giving myself grace. That's been the thing I've had to learn, how to give myself grace. And it did not come naturally because I am an overachiever, type A perfectionist.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure a lot of your members can relate to that because you attract a lot of those same personality types, I'm sure. So, yeah. But that's good. I really appreciate like the giving yourself permission, knowing yourself, feeling your feels, mm-hmm. and being able to take that and grow from that.
Yeah, I wish there was a sexy, glamorous, easy, snap your finger, like do these you know, and you're all going to be fine. Those feelings are going to go away. I mean, gosh, I can't tell you how many times I asked my counselor for that. Like, okay, so how much longer? Can you give me a roadmap? You know, when am I going to get out of this? You know, and she would just laugh at me because that's not the way that it works. And as much as I want that to be the case, it's just not how life is.
Sure. No, I think you covered all my questions. I am so grateful. I know you got up a little early to be with us this morning since you're out in Denver. Ashley, I'm not sure if you are in St. Louis or Denver, where the rest of you are coming from, but thank you for joining us. Thank you for coming to a Creative Mornings. And be sure to follow us on all the social medias, Facebook, Instagram, and learn about our next events. Nat just posted it in the chat. And how do we keep track of you, Stacey? What's any events you want to talk about?
Well, the best way probably is to connect with me on LinkedIn. And if you're curious about Rise Collaborative, you can check us out on riseworkspace.com or come on in for a tour or coffee or check out Rise Digital. And yeah, I look forward to continuing the conversation with some of you.
Thanks so much, Stacey. And I hope everyone has a great Friday and a great Memorial Day weekend. We'll see you next month.
Thanks.